Good day, ladies and gentlemen, I am Briareos Kerensky and this is the review of Ray Gigant, a dungeon crawler for the Vita. Lately I've been playing a lot of similar games, with Ray Gigant suffering from this as my playtime was sucked by Etrian Odyssey Untold 2, whose US version came out shortly after the subject of today's review. Had Labyrinth no Kanata before and Dungeon Travelers 2 few weeks ago, and Ray Gigant didn't get much love. It's due to Ray Gigant itself, though, that is not a bad game, but surely worse than other dungeon crawlers. I'd say that Ray Gigant is a decent dungeon crawler for beginners, as its systems are easy to master and never gets frustrating. Players used to hardships from the Etrian Odyssey series or other difficult crawlers, like the Dark Spire, will find Ray Gigant boring due to repetitive battles and uninspired dungeon design. Ray Gigant also has a huge language barrier, making some aspects of the battle system more cumbersome than they should be, and keeping me from the fine details of the story. And Ray Gigant loves its story. The opening sequence has one meager battle sandwiched between 40+ minutes of dialogues, and the dungeoneering phases will seem short in comparison to all the talking sequences the game features. From what I've gathered, Tokyo, if not Japan, fell under attack of supernatural creatures and a handful of individual mastered magical weapons to fight them. Among those, an elite few bonded with sentient weapons, granting them even more power, giving them a chance against the strongest creatures. Your character is Ichiya, one of these elite few. He's not too happy about his situation, but ends fighting along Mana and Kazuomi. Cue in the usual supporting crew, human enemies to add some drama, and you have a rather stereotypical setup. The game progresses via chapters, with intermissions between them. The feeling that Ray Gigant started as an anime, or was part of a multimedia project that eventually got canned, is strong. This results in a game featuring missions rather than a classic dungeons with multiple floors, and once a chapter is over, that particular dungeon is lost forever. Missions end when the local boss is defeated, and during intermissions it's possible to visit the current dungeon for grinding or any loot you might have missed. Upon entering a new dungeon, the party is briefed on enemy strength and location, along where the treasure chests lay. The structure of the dungeon itself is not revealed, and the map is drawn as the party moves from tile to tile. Enemies do not move, and there are no random encounters. Some encounters can be avoided, but most enemies block the only path forward. After a battle, the party is completely healed and any status effect is removed. Battles can be escaped without fault by sacrificing all action points. The party can exit a dungeon by a simple button press. Enemies will respawn when you get out of a dungeon, though. All these choices remove any tension from exploration, and should things get dire due to bad luck, fleeing a battle or restarting a dungeon are trivial at first, as the game doesn't penalize you too much. Other than shortcuts that need to be opened and trap tiles, dungeon design isn't particularly enticing, with no peculiar gimmick to tell any apart. As enemy and chests are visible on the map, you know where to go, and there is no joy in exploring any maze. Every dungeon has at least one red crystal that works as a save point and completely heals your party, including fallen members. The crystal also reveals the dungeon structure. The battle system is turn-based, with each of your 3 party members able to take up to 5 actions in a turn. Every action consumes action points, or APs, that the party draws from a common pool. The AP pool recharges at every turn, with extra points given when the enemy attacks you or characters use a specific action. Actions are assigned at the beginning of a turn, then the party and enemies act based on their base speed, modified by their action speed. Act phases can be fast-forwarded, as you don't really have any control of what's happening. Enemies have the same benefits and limitations. APs are carried from battle to battle, and enemy encounters are classified in 3 categories. Categories affect if AP cost is normal, halved or doubled. Which and how many enemies you'll face in any given encounter is random. This makes sometimes light encounters harder than heavy battles, as the party might end in facing more and tougher enemies, despite the lower AP cost. When the game forces heavy encounters with 3 enemies, it's sometimes better to retreat and retry the battle until there is only 1 enemy. Withdrawing costs all your APs, but it's better than suffering a death or a drawn-out battle that will deplete most of your resources anyway. Actions aren't freely selectable, they must be assigned to a menu to be used, each menu holding 3 actions. At first, characters start with just 1 menu available, and this gets restrictive pretty quickly. A second menu is available relatively soon, and possible actions aren't that many, but a menu cannot hold only 1 type of action, like an elemental attacks, as 1 action must always be a guard action, for example. Actions in menus can be swapped when in dungeons, and usually a dungeon is geared toward 1 or max 2 elements, but all this menu swapping gets tiresome very quickly, especially for non-Japanese speakers. Another problem is that non-typed attacks become useless against most bosses, relegating Maya to a support role, inflicting debuffs on enemies. Even when not striking a weakness, elemental attacks are able to inflict much more damage than non-type attacks. The other side of the coin is that elemental attacks are very costly, and only 3 or 4 attacks can be squeezed in 1 turn. This is not particularly bad against normal enemies, but bosses have a lot of hit points and their fight drags way too much. The SMB system comes in help in these situations. Each normal battle won, or each attack landed on a boss, will award an SMB point. With 50 points, Ichiya can transform and unleash a flurry of attacks. How many is determined by a small written in-game. This minigame is always the same, and attacks can use elements if one has been assigned to one of Ichiya's action menus. The animated sequence before and after the minigame is skippable, and you'll want to skip it after a couple of times. At 100 points, you can either trigger the transformation twice in 2 consecutive turns, or unleash a single, stronger version. This transformation makes Ichiya the most important member of the group, as he's the only one able to quickly cut a boss' health. Unfortunately, it also makes boss battles a race to get enough SMB points rather than using the party's abilities to overcome your enemy. Bosses can be brought down by standard attacks alone, but that is a long, boring task. As the party fights its way through enemies, characters will increase the drive counter, and when full, actions will cost health instead of APs. This is mostly used to recharge APs, and it's not as detrimental as it might sound, as it's still possible to use healing spells to keep the party going. This situation ends after a battle or by triggering an SMB attack. Enemies do not give the party experience points, but drop crystals that are used to unlock a character's actions. Each character has his or her own tree. All of them share basic improvements such as attack or defense, but everyone has a relative set of exclusive actions. Once unlocked, an action cannot be improved any further, and damage output relies more on stats. Not having levels in the usual way makes winning a battle less aggravating for dead party members, but it also means that you'll quickly shun unnecessary fights as crystal are relatively easy to come by and skill trees aren't that elaborate anyway. Once in a while, Chiharu, Kazuomi's sister, will offer you food. A character's weight determines a bonus on attack or evasion, but such events are so rare that it barely affects the game. The battle system appears complex at first, but it quickly succumbs to boredom and exploitation. Rather than using all three characters, it's possible to issue instruction to Kazuomi only, issuing a couple of healing actions and 3 elemental attacks, while the other 2 build up APs. This has the effect of keeping the party healthy, damaging enemies, avoiding wasting APs on useless attacks, and keep the enemies' APs low. Bosses can be brought down by only doing this, and the party itself only has basic buff-debuff abilities. No interlocking actions as in Etrian Odyssey or thinking ahead like in Labyrinth no Kanata. Enemies end up being simple numbers, and this is something I can move to many other dungeon crawlers. The party doesn't have interlocking attacks, so neither the enemies do. They don't buff each other, groups don't perform any peculiar action, they just blindly attack. There is no need to prioritize an enemy over another, you just attack based on a weakness and that's it. Again, this is a common problem in many dungeon crawlers, but I'd love to see developers giving more thought on enemy design in terms of game mechanics, rather than just making them singular entities. What Ray Gigant does well are big enemies. Once in a while, a giant enemy will appear and the party will split up in different locations to take on the beast. Game-wise, these battles are no different from normal bosses, but the scale is impressive and the giant's sprite suffers from minimal scale problems that are only barely visible via Vita TV. Sadly, the rest of the game doesn't quite live up to these battles. Recolors abound, and the enemies only have one rather basic animation cycle. It's better than the static sprites found in Dungeon Travelers or Wizardry Labyrinth of Lost Souls, but after seeing what Etrian Odyssey or Labyrinth no Kanata did on the 3DS, the presentation of Ray Gigant is very basic. Same goes for the dungeons, they are downright ugly to look at. The art in the game is not bad, however. Character portraits are good looking, albeit with limited number of expressions, with nice illustrations and well animated movies. The soundtrack is a score of jazzy tunes that might be well done, but doesn't really fit with the setting, being it exploration or battle. Having this soundtrack throughout the game also downplays normal moments, as the music during a pillow fight at the hot springs sound the same when you're battling a serpentine giant dragon. Moodier tunes during explorations and stronger tunes during battles would have gone a long way in setting the right tone. Ray Gigant is a dungeon crawler made for beginners. The battle system isn't particularly complex or deep, and the game can be played without too many hardships. Experts of the genre will find Ray Gigant severely lacking in every aspect and quickly lose interest in it. I hope you have enjoyed this review and you stick around for more. Briareos Kerensky, over and out.
楽しみすぎだな。そろそろ止めてきます。帰れば決戦。
そう、これです。目いっぱい楽しませてやろう。